Good evening. I'm Kelda Yoon. One man is dead and two others rushed to hospital tonight after a pit they were working in partially collapsed. It happened near Finch and Bayview Avenues in North York, and that's where we find our Dale Manukduk. Dale, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Kelda, I'm here outside the Blessed Trinity Church on Bayview Avenue, just north of Finch. Still a very active scene behind me. Toronto police remain here, as well as fire crews. What we know is that around 5:25, there were reports that a pit had collapsed on 3 men. Toronto Fire responded for a trench rescue. When they arrived, they found the 3 victims inside an excavation near the rear of the facility. The men were in there working on a water pipe repair. Here's more from Toronto Fire.
It's approximately a hole that is 25 by 25 cut through the pavement. Then they had used an excavator and a vacuum truck to access the pipe there. They were inserting a pipe or a camera inside the pipes to do an inspection when we had what appears to be, from what I can tell, a slough failure. So one of the walls buckled about halfway up. And it brings down tons of soil.
Now, 1 man was pronounced dead on scene. 2 others were taken to hospital in life-threatening condition, but they are now stable and recovering. Now, the Toronto Fire platoon chief there, he says that in his 38 years of service, he had never seen such danger for fire crews. He says that they risked their lives and broke every rule in the book when it comes to trench rescues. He says that the excavation hadn't been shored properly and that the weight of the soil, there was so much of it that a chunk of it had collapsed, rolled onto one of the men, and then 2 others were trapped. Now, you can see behind me there is a white sedan here. The Ministry of Labor has taken over this investigation, so we're sure to get more answers on what exactly happened at this project. We'll send it back to you, Kelda.
Thanks so much for that, Dale. Our Dale Manukduk in North York. Toronto police have made arrests in an auto theft scheme. 2 men are now facing almost 180 charges after allegedly selling stolen cars while working at used car dealerships. Ali Chiasson has the details.
When cars are stolen, they often end up shipped overseas. But some stay here and get resold as used cars. That's the kind of alleged scheme Toronto police say they've busted.
2 individuals have been arrested and 176 charges were laid in relation to fraudulent sales of stolen motor vehicles while employed at a legitimate car dealership.
Police say one of the accused would source stolen vehicles from numbered companies. How those numbered companies acquired those stolen vehicles is a separate investigation. Whether it's cars that were carjacked or stolen out of driveways is not known.
To further the deception, the accused would generate fictitious sales documents using stolen and fake VIN numbers or vehicle identification numbers. The stolen vehicles would then be delivered to the buyer, unbeknownst to them that the paperwork that they had just filled out didn't match the vehicle that they had taken possession of.
Toronto police arrested and charged 32-year-old Fadi Zeto with more than 80 charges for trafficking stolen cars and forgery. 35-year-old Harris Bachnek faces more than 90 charges.
To date, we've linked 22 fraudulent vehicle sales to these salespeople. Altogether, their activities have caused a financial loss of approximately $2.18 million.
The dealership was victimized here, but so were the unsuspecting drivers who right now are driving stolen cars and they don't even know it. Police advise anyone who bought a car from salesmen named Harris Bachnek or Fadi Zeto, the 2 accused in Project Warden, to contact investigators. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Members of the Ontario Gurudwara's committee say Sikh Canadians are in fear for their lives after a string of violence in the past few days. They say their places of worship are facing threats, and they believe the government of India is behind them. Greg Ross has more.
That is not our area.
Members of the Ontario Gurdwaras Committee met with the media today to express safety concerns for their community.
And yes, there is a fear factor and people are scared from Government of India officials right now and foreign interference.
They say recent outbreaks of violence are directly connected to plots by the Indian government to target Sikh Canadians.
Remember that we have recently learned from the RCMP, CSIS, and other Canadian officials that they believe Indian consulates were being used to unleash a wave of organized crime targeting the Sikh Canadian community.
The Canadian government expelled 6 Indian diplomats last month, linking them to the killing of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar last year. CBC Radio Canada reached out to the Consulate General of India in Toronto for comment, but did not hear back. On Sunday, a group called Sikhs for Justice protested outside of the Hindu Sabha temple in Brampton after they learned diplomats from the Indian consulate were there. The protest ended in a violent clash with members of the temple.
We are not in favor of any kind of violence. We are in favor of peaceful protest. It is a right, and we denounce any kind of violence, not only in front of worship place, anywhere within Canada.
They say none of the members of Sikhs for Justice are members of the Malton Gurdwara, but for some reason, a group of pro-Indian protesters went there on Sunday night. They say they made threats of violence against the Gurdwara, but they don't believe that they were coming from members of the Hindu Sabha temple.
So we are not pointing fingers to the Hindu Mandir or Hindu Mandir committee or normal devotees. We are pointing finger here to the Indian officials.
This is not a Hindu-Sikh issue. The protest outside the Mandir property was not against the Mandir or the Hindu community, but to protest against the Indian officials providing consular services at the temple.
Members of the Ontario Gurdwara's committee applauded a decision by the Sabha temple to suspend a priest caught on camera making threats against Sikh Canadians. They say they want peace between the Hindu and Sikh communities in Canada. Greg Ross, CBC News, Mississauga.
American voters have spoken, sending Donald Trump back to the White House as their next president. In a historic comeback, Trump defeated Kamala Harris to reclaim the U.S. presidency. His Republican Party also won back the Senate and could take the House. Susan Ormiston is in Michigan, where Republicans say the results show that the Democratic leadership is out of touch with Americans.
Cheers and tears for Trump's historic comeback. Michigan Republicans celebrating into the early hours. Jason Bright has followed Trump for 9 years.
He's the only one. He did it once, and he'll do it again. And we have that faith, you know. And that's what we've been keeping the faith, you know. And it's just nice to see this right now.
Look what happened. Is this crazy?
Trump inspired them to vote to take back a country they believe is falling into decline and has moved too far to the left. Michigan's split in a rural-urban divide echoed in many parts of the country.
Democrats don't care about middle America. They are the party of the coast, and this Republican Party is painting Michigan red tonight because they actually care about people in the middle part of the country.
By putting Americans' prosperity back rightfully where it belongs, in our own country.
Trump's message, dark and foreboding for many, was dismissed by his supporters.
Oh my gosh, I was giddy. You couldn't believe it. I had people texting me at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Jim Vaca's convinced Trump can supercharge the economy at home and solve foreign wars.
The first thing that I hope he does is go in there and let's get this war in Ukraine and Russia stopped. Let's get the war in Israel and Gaza stopped. I'm a veteran myself. There's nothing good that comes out of war.
In the end, Donald Trump was able to capture a variety of constituencies, including Latinos.
When Trump was in office, we had the best border security ever in the history of this nation. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best one. And under Biden and Kamala, we had the worst one ever in history.
Donald Trump gave a nod last night to a promise to unite this country, but after one of the nastiest elections in recent history and fears of a grievance campaign once he's in office, America remains deeply divided. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, near Detroit, Michigan.
A Trump presidency will present a new set of challenges for governments here at home. The Ontario government is trying to fight any possible tariffs that Trump may impose, going on what it calls a charm offensive. Queen's Park reporter Lorena Redekop has more.
I would tell you right now, it's time to bet big on Ontario.
Now that the Ontario government knows who it'll be dealing with south of the border, the push is on to remind the incoming Trump administration of the tight trade relationship between the U.S. and Ontario.
So it's going to be a constant reminder, and I'll call it a charm offensive, to remind them that we need each other in order for our both economies to grow.
Minister Fedeli says he's headed back to Washington next month, then again in January. Plus, he'll tour 3 different U.S. states.
The president knows that 9 million Americans wake up every morning to produce products to ship to Ontario.
Premier Ford says Ontario also has critical minerals that the U.S. wants, needed for electric vehicle batteries and also for defense products.
We've become an economic powerhouse now with the U.S. We're believing working together.
He's focusing on the slogan, Buy Can-Am, to counter Buy American from Trump. On the campaign trail, he promised to slap a minimum 10% tariff on imported products.
Using my favorite word, tariff.
Premier Ford says Canada has dealt with the tariff issue before against steel, retaliating with tariffs of its own. Ford was part of the tit-for-tat then, in conversation with the Canadian and U.S. governments.
I went back and said tariff everything. That doesn't work. It doesn't work for either country. I think they realize that. They pulled the tariffs off extremely quickly.
As for this time, dealing with the Trump administration 2.0.
So I think there is reason to be concerned. Tariffs and instability might result, but we've been down this road before.
Trump has also spoken out against electric vehicles, but EVs are a big part of the Ford government's economic policy.
So there would be a concern for our EV industry in Ontario, what that means in terms of whether the United States is going to pump the brakes on that in terms of how fast they're adopting that technology. But one big factor that might change all this is Elon Musk.
The world's richest man, who's the CEO of Tesla, was a major donor to Trump's campaign. Premier Ford says he's talked to the federal government and that they're united on dealing with a new U.S. administration. He expects other provinces will be as well. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
It's very misleading to cite a regional pattern for the whole census metropolitan area.
Coming up, the Ford government claims that only about 1% of Torontonians commute by bike, but that number jumps in places where lanes are already installed. We'll break down the data. The Toronto Maple Leafs are preparing for Remembrance Day next week. Today, they visited Sunnybrook Veterans Centre, honoring some of those who protected our freedoms. We tagged along on the trip.
Players had to go off to war, and fight for their country, and hence the Maple Leaf was formed on their jerseys.
Thanks to them, we have the freedom to play the game that we love, and it's special to be here amongst such a great population of veterans.
Definitely a very humbling experience to be able to be here and just seeing the faces looking out and all the Leafs jerseys and stuff, the support they show for us. So, it's been a great day.
As a kid growing up, I was a Chicago Blackhawk fan. I was from St. Catharines. So I've turned Leaf-wise now that I'm a Toronto boy.
I mean, you see the fans and all the younger generation and stuff coming to games and being able to show their support, but it's a little tougher for the folks here, and if they have wheelchairs or they can't walk as good, but to be able to see the passion even here in the hospital is just, it's incredible.
For all of us, it's important to remember, as time goes by, sometimes we get so busy and you can kind of forget or you take it for granted, this stuff, but this brings you back to reality every time I get an opportunity to be a part of this. And it's a special day for not only the veterans, but for their families and for guys like us.
I'll be disappointed if we don't win the cup this year, if you want to put it that way.
Welcome back. A 33-year-old woman who went missing while visiting family in Etobicoke has been found safe.
It's one of those circumstances that, given the distance between here and where she was ultimately located and the 2 or 3 days that have transpired between that, it's hard to say how she got there or what she's been doing in that time. The fact that we found her is obviously our greatest concern, but those additional pieces of information will form part of the investigation.
The woman lives in the U.S. but has been in the city for a couple weeks visiting family. She was reported missing on Monday evening, last seen near Park Lawn and Barrie Road. Police set up a command post in that area yesterday, saying that she has a medical condition that could be life-threatening. They located her this morning near Jane and Finch in good health. A Hamilton NDP MPP is reintroducing a private member's bill to create a provincial alert for missing vulnerable people. The Missing Persons Amendment Act would update the existing bill and would work in a similar fashion as an Amber Alert.
Bill 74 is another tool in the toolbox to be used when a vulnerable person goes missing, and all other resources have been used. They may be close to home, searching for a familiar landmark, a way home.
Taylor first proposed the act last March, but it stalled at the committee stage in the legislature. And she was joined at Queen's Park today by the mother of a young boy with autism who went missing for more than 2 weeks last month. The bill would give law enforcement the ability to put out targeted local alerts when a vulnerable person goes missing, and could apply to people with Alzheimer's or autism. The Ford government voted today to fast-track a bill that would lead to the removal of some of Toronto's major bike lanes. That move means less time for public consultation and legislative debate on a decision that critics say isn't being backed up by evidence. Now, when it comes to that evidence, the province's transportation minister has been focusing on one data point in particular. Lane Harrison takes a deeper look.
When it comes to bike lane use in Toronto, Transport Minister Prabmeet Sarkaria has largely focused on one number, 1.2%.
We know that these bike lanes, where only 1.2% of people use to commute to get to work, are taking away almost 50% of the infrastructure on those streets from vehicles. 70% of the population travels to work by car.
The 1.2% number comes from Statistics Canada, specifically the 2011 census, though it is in line with figures collected for the 2021 survey. But some cycling advocates are raising concerns about the figure because it was drawn from Toronto's census metropolitan area, which stretches far beyond the city to include places like Mississauga, Brampton, and Markham, as well as Vaughan, Richmond Hill, and Oakville. Some say that makes the data misleading.
Cycling is a local issue. It's really important we look at data within about 5 kilometers of where people live and work. And that's really the downtown core of the city of Toronto.
Let's look at that local StatCan data around the bike lanes in Sarkaria's sites. The government could remove all of the Bloor, Yonge, and University bike lanes. The University Rosedale Federal Riding contains a chunk of the Bloor lane and half of the University track. The 2021 census found in that area 8.3% of people say a bike is their main way to commute, while 36% of people drive. The rest of the University lane sits in Spadina-Fort York, where nearly 5% of people bike and 37% drive. Further down Bloor to the west, in Parkdale High Park, about 6% of people bike, while 49% drive. But in Etobicoke Lakeshore, where the bike lane debate may be the hottest, 1.2% of people bike, while 69% drive.
It's very misleading to cite a regional pattern for the whole census metropolitan area.
In 2019, the city did a cycling survey of about 1,500 people, which can be considered representative of Torontonians. While the StatCan survey looked at people who primarily commute by bike, the city asked people if they ride bikes in good weather for any reason. Almost half said they do to get to work, school, shop, or visit friends. Asked if the 1.2% figure is misrepresenting the situation, Sarkaria disagreed.
The reality of the situation is that gridlock is the worst it's ever been in this province. I have, visited many business owners on Bloor Street, on Yonge Street, on University. I've had many conversations. TomTom, which runs a international study, has ranked Toronto as the 3rd worst and most congested city.
Lane Harrison, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, Colette, it was another day that I didn't have to bring a jacket. It was nice, but I know the temperatures will be changing a little bit as the week goes on.
Yeah, that's what we're kind of seeing. At least this time it's one of those cases where we're being eased into it a little bit.
I like that.
Yes, which is always kind of nice. So we will find those temperatures coming down. But really, as I look ahead, we'll largely be a little above seasonal, if anything, with just a few minor exceptions. I want to start us off, though, tonight with what's been happening with Hurricane Rafael, because it's been interacting as it's been moving across western Cuba through the day today and evening. And it came on as a Category 3, so as a major hurricane, Category 2 status now. So still a very strong hurricane. It will make its way into the Gulf, and then it kind of meanders and stalls for a while there. So what will happen after that, after Saturday, we'll kind of keep updating you. But for Cuba, power outages, landslides, mudslides, just flash flooding, all kinds of destruction with an island of that size. And when you have what is considered a major hurricane at a Category 3 status. So keeping an eye on the situation there, and of course keeping an eye on our skies as well. You know, some of the daytime highs, when we look at some of the temperatures, it's just been incredible with not necessarily records, but we flirted with some of the records at times. We spent most of the afternoon at around 19 degrees and had some sunshine in there as well. So the jet stream sort of tells the story of what is to come. And with that, we're seeing it go to more of a what I'd call a zonal pattern across the Great Lakes. So the temperature's not extreme up or down, no extreme systems coming in. We get a bit of a dip Saturday, so a slight cool down Saturday, and then we'll have a system kind of pushing in Sunday to bring in some of that wet weather. But in the meantime, as high pressure really continues to build in, we are talking about clearing skies, so sunshine for the next few days here that we will be able to enjoy. And it's not really until we get to late Saturday and then that system coming in on Sunday that we'll be dealing with that. So what about the temperature profiles here in the story? I said easing into it. So overnight tonight, we're looking like a low of 8 to 9 degrees, so mild overnight. The daytime high tomorrow up to 13. And then we'll get some cooler nights, especially Friday night into Saturday morning. So that's that cooler day there, Kelda, into Saturday.
Those temperatures are seasonal. We forget that, you know, because we've been spoiled with like 20-degree temperatures, that we forget this is normal for November.
Yes, 9 is a normal daytime high at this time of year, right?
Thanks so much, Colette. And that's our show for you tonight. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.